Okay, students, welcome to Leadership in the Workplace. This is the very first webinar installment for this subject, which is called Leadership in the Workplace. The unit of competence that this subject relates to is show leadership in the workplace, so you might or you may refer to it as that. In this session today, we'll be taking through Section 1, which is Model High Standards Management, Performance and Behaviour. And so there's, I think, a series of 10 questions that make up this first learning activity, this first series of questions in Section 1. We'll take you through those questions. By the end of the session, you'll have all of the information that you need to know to be able to successfully complete that first section, that first learning activity. This time next week, we'll be doing Section 2 and 3. The following week, in 2 weeks' time, that is, we'll take you through all 5 of those assessment tasks. So that is the 3-stage plan for this subject, leadership in the workplace. Without further ado, I think we might just jump straight into the first round of questions. There's quite a lot of information in this subject. There's quite a lot to talk about. We can really sort of, I guess, talk quite openly for a fair amount of time. Let's just jump into it because actually there's quite a few questions today as well. So, is there anything you would like to add before we jump straight into the first learning activity?
No, not at all. I think we just get straight into it tonight and, yeah, we have a look at these questions. I hope everybody's having a nice Monday. It's always a nice day to do a webinar on a Monday evening, I have to say.
Yeah.
Especially about leadership in the workplace, which is good.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, look, there's lots of other subjects that sort of touch on leadership, and we try and bring it into the conversation at different times. And because leadership is just such a pervasive thing, it's just everywhere. And, you know, when we're talking about leadership, we're talking really about that sort of human side of the business, and we'll get to it in a little bit when we sort of talk about management versus leadership. But so leadership sort of pops up and pops around and is sort of involved in whether you're talking about your own journey and your own self-reflection, whether you're talking about a project team and leadership is very important in you know, motivating energy out of others there, whether you're talking about managing meetings and understanding that interpersonal sort of communication skills, so using that skill in that sort of area, whether it's whether it's staff recruitment or one of those sort of areas. Again, leadership becomes an important area because you need a degree of decision making and risk, and there's that human element to it. So, but this subject is almost wholly and solely focused on the area of leadership in the workplace, which is the name of the subject, but on the topic of leadership. So to fully explore the topic of leadership, we sort of look at leadership as well as management theories. We'll give you a bit of a understanding of, we'll show you, firstly I think the most important thing is to make that distinction or make that difference, define that difference between management and leadership for students, and just sort of put it out there. But I think we might do so by just using the questions that we have in front of us as a guide and using those questions to sort of stimulate conversation, and it's probably just going to be the best way to run this session tonight, Alyssa. So I think what we'll do is, I think we'll just sort of go through each question. We'll have a bit of a chat as we always do, and there's quite a lot of there's quite a big sort of concept, I guess, that just underpins the whole thing. So what might happen is we might end up touching on areas which might be sort of, you know, bits that you might put in another question, so to speak, or we might be referring to some of the answers that appear in other places. So that might happen a little bit, but that's okay. We'll sort of take you through it. Any comments before we start? Anything that you want to clear up before we start here, Alyssa? Do you want to get stuck straight into it and go from there?
Yeah, let's get stuck straight into it and see where it goes, because obviously, as you said, it is purely about leadership, and there is a lot of information, there's a lot of terminology, and there's a lot of theories and things associated with it, which I know you enjoy immensely, Adam. Yeah, let's get into it and let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, sounds good to me. So the first actual question is actually looking at the role of a manager.
Yeah.
So we will start to break down those differences for you the more that we talk about leadership, but really from the get-go we just want to talk about management. And you'll see by the end of this session you'll definitely have a really clear understanding on how those two are different, and how those two also, sorry, I'm looking at question 10, which is always confusing everybody. And yeah, so we'll be looking at those sort of two things, and you'll sort of see how the two actually work together. to a certain degree, and how the two are clearly quite different things as well. So the first question I'm going to read out is, how do you perceive the role of a business or organisational manager? So what things does a manager need to do, and what resources do they draw upon? So we're talking about a manager here, an organisational manager, a business manager, whatever variation on a theme you'd like, but the word is manager. And the question that we're asking students is, what are the sort of things that a manager needs to do? And the second part is, what resources will they draw from and on and upon? So did you want to kick off this one?
Yeah, look, I don't mind kicking off this one. I guess when you're looking at this particular type of question, I guess as you've mentioned, Adam, there's two elements to the question. I guess what your perception or what things a manager actually does, and obviously that second part, which is what resources or information can they draw on within their role. So essentially, just as an overview, I guess what we're really looking at, and we've talked, you know, a lot about roles and expectations and responsibilities in previous units. So what we're looking at here is we're really looking at you to kind of give us some of the things that a manager would be involved in doing on a regular basis within their role themselves.
All right, so let's contextualise it. Sorry, I'll jump in there just a second.
Sure.
Let's contextualise. So let's think of a manager. Let's pick a manager of a business that we can all relate to. So what do you think? Maybe like a fast food chain. What do you think about that?
Yep.
Sounds good?
Yep.
Manager of Hungry Jack's, McDonald's, something like that. There's a nice plug there for the two biggest disgusting fast food chains in the country. Beautiful. Okay, so when we're talking about the manager's role at McDonald's or Hungry Jack's or whatever the case might be, did you want to continue from there?
No, yeah, well, we can definitely, and what we can do is, if we have a look at a role like the manager of Hungry Jack's, let's think about, I guess, some of the things that she or he would actually be doing in their position. So what would be some of the things that they would do on a regular basis? Now, remember, obviously it's important that the manager leads by example and, you know, operationally is in there doing and performing tasks. But I guess what we want to do is we really want to differentiate between what their role is as opposed to, you know, being on the floor or being one of those persons that serves or, you know, takes the money. So what do they do in their role? What are they responsible for? What are some of the tasks that they might perform?
Yeah. Oh, look, I would have thought, you know, probably one of the most important tasks is really the rostering of other staff and the delegation of shifts and things like that. I mean, adequately staffing the joint is probably a good starting point. If I'm the manager, the first thing that I probably think of when I walk in the door, I'm the first person to open the door. There is, who have I got on shift today? Who's coming in today? What sort of day have we got in front of us? So probably the first thing that I would think about is you know, I guess working out the different positions that you have in the business, what sort of workload we've got in front of us, so identifying those sort of workloads, and you know, maybe delegating some of the jobs. So going, cool, I'm going to have you on chips, you're going to be on drinks, okay, we need 2 people out the back making burgers. It might be also the organisation of things like, you know, I'm just thinking in terms of structure, like a lunch break and things like that. So we've got a big rush of people coming in at lunchtime, as we always do. So guys, we've got to work out our breaks, that we all take our breaks before 12 o'clock, because we know we have that big rush at 12, and we all need to be on deck at 12.
Yep, definitely. You might get a customer that might come in a really busy shift, and they might be incredibly unhappy or upset about their experience at that particular role, in that particular area. So they might need to come to you for, you know, you might need some, you know, conflict resolution or some problem solving, complaint handling skills as well to be able to make that right.
Yep. Part of my role as manager might be to, you know, just to make sure that people are doing their roles properly and that they've got adequate training, and you know, just to make sure that they're hitting their targets. So the guys might have certain targets to hit each day. My role might just be to make sure to monitor their performance and make sure that they're hitting their targets and keeping an eye on things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
What about setting goals for the team, things like that? Is that the manager's role, do you think?
Oh, I definitely think, like, sitting down, setting goals, you know, setting objectives, implementing things like KPIs, which is what we talked a little bit about last week as well. All of those things are obviously roles of the manager, because the manager's there to really hopefully drive the team to achieving a series of objectives. So I think setting goals and targets and objectives is also a good one. I also think, like what we talked about, things like measuring performance, so having strong policies and procedures in place, and making sure that there is, as you said before, adequate training and instruction around, and having those things accessible as well, so people know what their expectations are in terms of their own roles when they do come in.
Yeah, I think you mentioned conflict resolution before. That's a really good one. So quite often if somebody might want to speak to the manager, so you might have to come in and defuse the situation. The customer looks unhappy. They want to speak to the manager. They want a refund. So you might be empowered as the manager with I guess a lot of decision making. So making some financial decisions for the business, things like that. Budgets as well. You might be in charge of, in the case of McDonald's or KFC or the version that we're talking about, you might be in charge of cash handling. So handling cash and then doing up the tills at the end of the day, or running certain reports, or those sorts of things might be in the case handled by the role of a manager.
Yep. I was just about to say report, looking at data and compiling reports and all those types of things. So yeah, I think I might have touched on the second part.
Okay, so now what sort of, the second half, let's talk about it. What resources do they draw from? So we know they've got to manage all these people, we've got to manage the conflict, we've got to organise performance, we've got to make sure everyone's trained, people are turning up to work, all these things we've got to just keep this ship afloat, really. That's what a manager's there to do, is keep everything ticking along smoothly and without any problems. How are they going to do that? So what sort of things are they going to tap into to make sure that everything stays smooth and runs efficiently and well?
Yeah, definitely.
What sort of resources can they draw on?
And I think there are resources that they can draw on that are that come from internal resources. So things that come from within the company, but there's also resources that I think also can come from outside the company that can be used for a manager to draw information on. And I guess if we look at things from an internal perspective, we could define internal as being internal company, but also themselves internally, what skills that they might have to be able to assist them to manage teams, but also the physical resources of perhaps, having access to certain types of information that might help a manager, like, for example, things like access to policies and procedures, those types of things, access to information that perhaps might be training manuals or things like that, to be able to assist them to do their jobs too.
Yep, sounds good.
So some of those different types of things, but at the same time I think you can draw on resources that perhaps might come externally. So you might have connections or networks with suppliers, and suppliers might assist you with making decisions about certain products or certain trends within the fast food industry. So you could always draw on the human element of resources, but also the physical element of resources, I guess.
Yep. I mean, for me, you get a lot of things from your own sort of administrative systems, your own computer systems, or your own internal systems in the business, a lot of resources. So, there might be a form that you need to fill in or something like that. There's often templates that a business uses. So a lot of the time as a manager, you're resourcing a lot of things, as you say, internally from the business. So it could be the computer systems and that sort of infrastructure. But also, the business are obviously the main driver of providing money. I doubt there'd be many managers out there that would pull out their own credit card to, resource certain things that need to be resourced, so to speak. So for the most part, the business is going to be in charge of doing a lot of those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being the source of those resources.
Yeah, definitely.
You actually mentioned something interesting at the start there. You talked about, Alyssa, they can often draw resources externally. What do you mean by that, and how could I, as a manager, draw something externally, a resource externally?
Look, we talked about in that, I think, that very first unit on planning, we talked about the importance, I think, of networking, and I think that things like networking and understanding who your competitors are and really what your competitors doing are a really big resource. in terms of supplying you with information on maybe continuous improvement or understanding what's currently trending in an industry. So, you know, if I talk about external resources, I'm really talking about drawing information from people that are in your network, and it could be anyone from suppliers to the person that might be your friend who works at McDonald's in the role of a manager, or in KFC as the role of a manager. So using those networks as resource information to see what's happening in the industry or what's happening in your competitors' industry too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are things that are out of our scope, and we're not always expected to know how to do everything, but what we are expected to do is know how to resource things as a manager. So a manager really needs to know how they will be able to resource, whether that's information from a network, as you're talking about externally, whether that's internal mechanisms. Now, that might be money. Now, if I'm managing at McDonald's, I know for sure that McDonald's don't allow their managers to walk in and open the cash register and take money out of the till and then walk down the street and buy something that they think the business might need. There's a system, there's a process. So, you know, in order for them to access some things, there might be a particular system. They might have to sign a particular form. They might have to get consent from another member, so another internal member. It's quite often sort of, you know, systems. So that's what we're talking about. We need to know how, as a manager, we need to be very much in control and know how to resource things that we need. Well, let's move on to the next question, because I don't want to get too caught up on this one. But basically, this is one that most students can answer pretty cleanly and clearly, I would have thought. There's lots of information in the resource material guides about these questions too, so have a look through those. Question 2 is, how do you think managers can ensure that their performance behaviour meets the requirements of the organisation for which they work for? So, I'll read it again. How do you think managers can ensure that their own performance behaviour meets the requirements of the organisation that they're working at? Melissa, do you want to lead this one?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, last week we were talking a bit about leadership and the concept of leadership and the importance of really making sure that your team know what the expectations are of them. And I guess, you know, as a manager, you're constantly thinking about what the expectations of your team are or what you expect from your team, and you're constantly making sure that you provide them with enough information and assistance to be able to get them to understand what you expect from them. So I guess the question now is, how do you know what is expected of you? Like, where do you get information that might assist you in knowing that, well, these are the performance standards that are expected of the organisation, and so therefore you can meet those performance standards, or you can meet those behavioural standards, I should say. And I think last week as well we talked about things like having, you know, a code of conduct. We talked about things like having strong policies and procedures in place as well. You know, strong internal resources that really determine the performance behaviours that are required when you are a manager and also when you are a team member. So those are some things you can definitely draw on to ensure that you're meeting what's required, I think.
Yeah, look, you know, funnily enough, it's usually the front line that have the strongest KPIs essentially against them, which is really weird, really, because, you know, you would have thought that the managers, the ones that are in that sort of middle management, senior management, those sort of roles that effectively guide the entire organisation and, you know, disseminate information and are in charge of leadership practice that we'll be getting onto in a minute, those sorts of things, you'd think that they would have much higher, you know, I guess sort of, you know, monitoring or performance indicators or methods of but it's not always the case.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, it's not always the case. It's quite often that once you get to that level, that you've earned the right to be at that place, you have a certain amount of information, experience, knowledge, skill, whatever that you're bringing to the table, and that you're there just to effectively do the role that you need to do. Now, so how can you, if nobody's telling you what your job is, or well, not what your job is, but if nobody's telling you
how you should behave and how you should act, yeah.
Well, what the performance standards are really, and how do you do it? So, I mean, for me, I guess to make sure that you're meeting the requirements of an organisation, you really got to firstly understand what that organisation is about, and then be on the same page. So, you can't be moving in opposite directions to what the business is trying to do. So that's, got to be on the same sort of page, moving in the same direction.
And be culturally aligned to the organisation as well. As you mentioned, if you've got to be moving along with the organisation, so therefore you have to understand what the culture of the organisation is about, and understand what the focus and I guess what the ethical stance of an organisation is, and just make sure that you're aligned to that, as you mentioned before. I think that's also a big thing too.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look, I guess one of the difficult things with managers setting performance standards is that a good manager, and this is where we start to lead into leadership, but, a good leader, or a good manager who's a good leader, invites other people into their space and gives other people responsibility. Now, this is, I guess, an area of what makes a really good leader, so it's kind of interesting if we say, well, hang on, why would I have performance measures against me if I'm giving some of these roles to other people? So it gets a little bit hazy in terms of where the actual start and finish point of a manager's role or a leader's role is. So, but one thing I would do as a good leader or a good manager in this space is, I would have very, very strong expectations for myself, firstly. Secondly, I'd be very open and honest to those that I work with and say, these are the expectations that I'm putting on myself, and this is what I expect of myself in working in this business. It does a number of things. A, it opens you up to a bit of vulnerability, but that's a good thing because it's openness. You're showing other people what you stand for and what you're believing in. But it also makes you accountable as well for your actions too, which is big in terms of leadership. So again, when we're talking about how managers do this, it's really starting to verge on leadership skills in terms of, I guess, doing it really well. But there are a couple of ways that I would sort of look at doing it. Another way a manager could sort of start to really ensure that their performance meets the requirements of the organisation is to potentially set some goals for themselves. Set weekly goals, set daily goals, set 6-month goal. Use that planning cycle that we talked about. Have a few goals at different stages, so that the work that you're doing now is sort of going towards those long-term goals of the business as well. Alyssa, anything else you'd like to add to this one before we move on to number 3?
No, let's move on to number 3, because I think we're now bordering on kind of the difference between managers and leaders, which is what obviously the next question is about. So I think this is running smoothly and running quite nicely, and I think we're ready for that question 3.
Yeah. We talked about it before. Yeah, we talked about it a bit before. It's an area that I generally love talking about leadership. It's because I'll tell you why, because it's available to anybody. And it's far more powerful than just about anything else that we have on this planet. A good leader has the ability to change this world, and that's really the truth of it. And it's not something that's just given to somebody because that's their job title and so on and so forth. It's something that's available to everybody, and the best managers, the ones that are the best managers, and it's always the way, best managers are generally good leaders. So we need to sort of start talking a little bit about leadership and what makes, I guess, what makes leadership in order to sort of, to go Did you?
Yeah, let's read that next. Shall we move on? And I'll read that third question. It says,
so we'll read the third question, yep.
Yeah, it says, explain in the context of meeting organisational needs the difference between managers and leaders, and submit your answer for assessment. So we're looking at really looking at the difference between managers and leaders.
Now, I'm happy for the guys to really just refer to leadership skill and leadership practice in answering this question. So when they're answering this question, they tell us about leadership, well, then they're effectively identifying the differences there because they've previously identified things in the role of the manager in the first question.
Yep.
And so now what we're wanting to discover is, well, what are the extra bits that make up a leader? So, look, it really begins with the central idea that leadership is a process of influencing. So it's about influencing. It's a people area. So it's people to people. It's about human beings, and it's about influencing what sort of human effort and energy is present, and how it's used and how it's replenished. So really, it's, you know, I've talked about this before, but leadership skill is really the ability to mobilize energy out of somebody else. But I guess the central idea in leadership is understanding that, you know, it's the process of influencing somebody. And so you need to understand energy that might be present within a person, how that energy is being used, and then how it's being replenished. Is that, am I going a little bit too high level, do you think, at this stage?
No, 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 no. So when you say looking at the energy, I mean, can we kind of, I guess, can we explain that in terms of an example or a function? Is it okay to say functionality of leadership?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, look, it's that interpersonal dealings that we have every day. You know, I mean, unless you live in a cave, unless you live comfortably your whole life in a cave, you're going to spend a lot of time in your life interacting with other people, and then either being influenced by them or influencing others. And so that's effectively what we're talking about when we're talking about leadership. And so leadership is really about choosing to make a difference to a situation or an event.
Right.
So, you know, it's about wanting to, as I say, mobilize energy out of other people, but it's also about doing it for a sustained, you know, period of time. It's not really just about doing it just for that moment, although it may need to be done for that moment. It's about doing it for a sustained period of time.
Yeah.
So could it can involve groups.
Yeah. Could we say that what would be, I guess, what would be an example of a leadership function over an example of a management function? So, say for example, you talk about, you know, moving energy or the, you know, that kind of context. Could we say that, you know, you can identify and understand, you know, different people, understand what makes them work, how to motivate them, and how to inspire them to achieve great things, as opposed to, you know, a manager who might look at perhaps constructing a roster that is productively efficient or something like that.
I'm going to answer this one by telling you a bit of a story, and then at the end of that story, tell me if I've completely forgotten what your question was.
Okay.
I had a lecturer of mine once, actually, what she said to the whole group, she said, okay, so most of you guys in this room are managers, or you're team leaders, or whatever the sort of your role is. A lot of you guys have got other people that you're working with and together and what have you. Okay, I just want you to consider a situation where, you know, the leader of your business, the manager, or yourself, if you're managing a business. Can you hear me at the moment? Is that okay?
I can hear you, yes. I just put it on mute because I had a big airplane that was flying over. Yes.
Oh, okay, I was wondering what happened. No, right. So what she said was, okay, so what would happen if your leader or the manager goes away for a holiday for a couple of weeks, comes back, has a look at everything, and goes, wow, everything worked perfectly. I was gone for a couple of weeks, and everything was perfect. You know, the sales were great, all of the KPIs were being met, nothing went wrong.
Yep.
There's not even one email to read through. Everything has just been handled and dealt with, and everything's been perfect. And she says to everybody, is that good leadership?
Yep.
And everybody in the room said, yes, I think it's good leadership.
Yep.
And she said, well, I don't think it's good leadership. And then everyone, whoa, 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 what are you talking about? What are you talking about? She said, what that is great management.
Yep.
To put all your systems in place, that they just work smoothly and that you've got them all, that's management. That is management and management only. So if that is good leadership, then what should happen when you go on a holiday for 2 weeks is that there should be some drop of morale within your people, within your staff, within the people that you're working with, because clearly you have an influence on other people, and that's what leadership is. It's about influencing and motivating and inspiring others. And if you're not there and nothing happens, I question your ability to influence and motivate others.
Right.
That's what we're talking about when we're talking about leadership. So we really have to make that clear distinction between managers and leaders. But the best managers are good leaders because they're the ones that inspire us. They're the ones that we want to come in and work for. They're the ones that we want to, you know, be involved with. And so I want to actually refer to a bit of. There's a lot of leadership theory out there, guys. So if you're interested in leadership theory, there's so much of it out there, and I just suggest when you're going through leadership theory that every little bit of leadership theory has something good about it, but it's not the be-all and end-all. I think it's important to just be a little bit, aware of what you're reading, and not everything is, you have to be be able to critically analyze things that you read and hear in life in general.
Mm-hmm.
But there's leadership theory that talks about the transformational, transactional leader. There's leadership theory that talks about situational leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Now, situational leadership is, I guess, leadership that sort of says, well, depending on the situation, I will do this or I'll do that. So I'm either going to be, directing and telling somebody, okay, I need you to pick this box up and put it over there, or I'm delegating that role to somebody, depending on the situation. So that's situational leadership. There's a few others out there, and look, they're all okay, but they've all got their own little bit to it. And I say that because leadership, by nature, because it's a people thing, because we're trying to motivate human beings and we're trying to influence human beings, it involves an element of human psychology. It can't not. And I just think that it's not really horses for courses. I don't think that there's a black and white way to do anything in this space.
Yep.
I think fundamentally it's an area that just is incredibly adaptable and needs to be adaptable. And so effectively, effective leadership is contextual. What is needed will change with the time and the place and the people, and a good leader will be able to adapt to that situation. One last thing before I think we should continue with the questions, but I'm just going to give you one more little bit on what I consider some good leadership skills.
Yep.
When I say there are other academics out there that put their works out, and I'm only just compiling a lot of their ideas when I refer to this. What I will refer to is a gentleman by the name of James Clausen, and he's actually written a book called 3 Levels of Leadership. This is actually a really impressive book if anybody's interested in some further reading. And it fundamentally talks about 3 different levels, which I'm going to give you the 10-second version of this book in 5 seconds. How does that doesn't even make any sense. Okay, so what he talks about is that there's 3 levels of leadership. Now, most people are sitting on level 1. Some good people will sit on level 2, and really only the very, very small handful of exceptional, effective leaders operate in this level that we call level 3. And so what are these levels? Well, level 1 is I guess that's the power of influencing visible behaviour only. So what level 1 aims to do is that it aims to adjust behaviour that is able to be visualised, and that's all. So if I see you working or doing something, I'm going to try and change the way you're going to do something. I'm going to try and alter your behaviour. Now, the ways that I go about doing that is I've got a couple of different tools available to me at level 1 leadership. I can offer rewards for you. So I could say, Alyssa, tell you what, if you pick up another 50 boxes today, I'm going to chuck in an extra $20 on your paycheck at the end of the week. Cool? What happens is you go, okay, great, I'm going to pick up an extra 50 boxes today. Tomorrow, you're going to pick up an extra 50 boxes, and I'll come back to you tomorrow and say, you know what, Alyssa, if you pick up an extra 30 boxes today, I'll give you an extra $25. You know what, if you pick up an extra 100 boxes every day for the rest of this week, I'll actually give you that money forever, ever. If you just continue that standard, I will pay you at that level. Now what happens is at the start, it's all very lovely and it's all well and good. You're motivated for that extra 20 bucks. As time progresses and the days go on and as time rolls on, that motivation for that extra few dollars starts to wane a little bit, starts to lower, So what we're talking about here is offering rewards, and this is how businesses do it. I mean, businesses are the worst culprits in this space, in my opinion, out of everybody. Why is that? Because bonuses, financial rewards, all of these areas are really trying to inspire, influence and motivate staff and human beings only in that space, only in that area of behaviour, reward.
Yeah.
It's short term, it's not long term. Now other areas or other tools available in this level 1 are things like coercion or threat. So I could say to you, Alyssa, if you don't pick that box up right now, you're out of here. Yep. Now that's good. That is motivation for you to lift that box up. It's enough motivation today.
Yeah.
But you know what? It may not be enough motivation tomorrow or the day after. So it's only in that level 1 space. Now you know what? Level 1 space is where everybody works. Business is the worst. And for the most part, that industrial revolution where we had lots of manufacturing, and we had these big pyramids of organizational structures where you had people sitting in these little offices directing hundreds of staff to go off and do. That's all, that level 1 leadership. Pick up your things, otherwise you're out of here. If you don't hit your targets, you're gone. And there's no real care or discussion or anything like that, right? And that's level 1. Let's talk about level 2, and I'll quickly talk about level 3, and then we'll actually probably, with all of that information, just proceed by doing really quick stuff on this. So level 2, what that actually aims to do, it goes up a level from the visible behaviour.
Yep.
What it attempts to do is influence you on your conscious thought. It tries to change the way you might think about something. Now that's a lot more powerful than obviously just the visible behaviour. So what are the tools available to leaders that operate in this space? For the most part, it's logic. It's a lot of facts, and it's a lot of persuasion, because what it's trying to do is trying to say, I know you thought that this was the best way to lift up this box, but let me tell you, I'm going to actually show you all of the facts here. I've got a list of 300 different examples of where people, hurt themselves lifting it that way, but where they had a great success in lifting it this way. So this is a much stronger area of leadership. So what we're talking about here is where you're trying to influence somebody based on logic or fact.
Right.
So we're trying to influence them based on their way of thinking. You thought this before, but let me tell you, I'm going to show you all of these details here. I'm going to show you these facts. I'm going to inspire you to behave differently, or I'm going to motivate you to do some things based on this logic here, based on this way of thinking. So we're trying to change your conscious thought. Remember, conscious thought is only what's on the surface. It's not what lies underneath.
Yep.
Now, level 3 leadership, what that actually aims to do is it actually aims to influence you on what actually James Clausen refers to as your BABES, which is, I'm actually going to write this in, B-A-B-E-S,
yep.
which is your values, your attitudes, your beliefs. Ooh, can't spell it. Is that right? No. And
this is when we get to see how everybody gets to see how great spellers we are, Adam.
That's it. That tough thing is this program doesn't actually come with the I don't know if you've noticed there. I'm sure you probably have. There's no spell check available when we're marking students' work. So students, if you ever notice any spelling errors when we're marking your work, the reason is that there's no spell check there. So there's no excuse. Absolutely no excuse. Okay. So effectively, James Clausen, in talking about level 3, Clausen suggests that a skilled leader has the ability to recognise and clarify somebody's values, their attitudes, their beliefs and expectations, and attempt to influence them at this very core.
Wow.
So, the belief is that if influencing somebody's inner values and attitudes will in turn influence the way they consciously think and therefore the way they act. So influence somebody's attitudes and values changes the way they, that level 2, that thought, that conscious thought, which conscious thought drives your action. So behaviour, which is that level 1 leadership that we talked about. So this is level 3. So what we're trying to do is, influence the way that somebody's value system is, because that's going to have the most profound impact on an individual's level of engagement and on a much longer term as well.
So what was your statistic about how many people out there are actually level 3 managers or level 3 leaders?
I don't have a statistic.
Okay.
I don't really know. It's really hard to quantify, I guess.
Yeah.
But the majority of us in business anyway operate in that visible behaviour.
Yeah.
Typically, we think the best way to influence somebody is by logic and influencing the way they think about something.
Yep.
So I know that's the way you've thought about it before. But have a look at this. I want to show you some logic. I want to show you some facts. I'm going to, persuade you that this is the right way. And it's really interesting that really the way to really truly motivate and influence somebody on a long-term level, to get, to influence them at their core, which is what they actually stand for, which is their value system, it's their belief, it's what they expect of themselves, what they expect of others.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the big thing that people want to know is what are the tools that we have available to us at this part. And this is an ever-going conversation. This will never effectively stop. But some of the things that we have at our disposal are things like self-disclosure, active listening, caring, invitation. Now, I talked about invitation before. It's one of the most potent ways to show leadership, to invite somebody or to hand responsibility over to somebody else. Protecting confidentiality of others, respecting other people, being authentic. That is a key leadership, level 3 leadership trait.
Do you think, just as a matter of an offset, I obviously don't want to get too off track, but do you think those skills are, because they seem like that they're skills that are very difficult, it's not a short-term gap to fill, do you know, not a short-term gap, it's like there's going to be a lot of processing and a lot of personal development that will go into being able to do those types and be able to, you know, manage people or lead people at that level as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it does take practice, and you know, like I think the only thing you can do is if you're interested in the topic, is do a bit of reading yourself. You mentioned self-development and self-reflection. That is the, you know, I think it's Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. You know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And he really he breaks down the idea that intelligence is only about this IQ business, this intelligent quotient. In fact, intelligence is really about emotional intelligence, which is about the ability to A, understand yourself, and then B, be able to understand others. And that is the core in this sort of level 3 leadership as well. So to be able to influence other people, you need to be able to understand yourself immensely. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen for people that want to develop their leadership skill on self-reflection. You need to know how you operate in certain situations. You need to know all the, you know what, some of the nasty stuff you need to be exposed with a little bit and go, you know what, I have this pretty nasty habit, and this is not going to, you know, last as if I'm going to be a great leader, because it's going to, you know, upset or influence in the wrong way, so to speak.
Yeah, interesting.
There is a test lab. In this set of questions, there's actually a self-reflection test, and that's partly why it's in there, because it's important for the guys to start to know and start to do.
Question 7, which is that reflection, a little self-assessment.
Look, I'll give you an example of a time that I recently, you know, tried to use some leadership skill, and look, I guess it's just about, you know, consciously making, you know, because as I said earlier, leadership is really that conscious decision to try and change the situation. Go, hey, I'm going to make a difference in this event or situation. So where you feel that you've got an option to potentially make a positive difference, try to, and that's leadership. I'll give you an example. I was, you know, as you know, I like to write music and play in a band and do all that sort of stuff. My best mate was playing drums. This was a year ago. My best mate was playing drums. Me and the vocalist, we got together and we wrote like 4, 5, 6 songs really quickly. We brought them back to the drums to play. I could see he was struggling a little bit, and he was trying really, really hard to be involved, because he really desperately wanted to, you know, to be involved and part of the songwriting process, so that he had ownership. And I was aware of that wow, me and the vocalist actually, we wrote all this stuff, now we're bringing it to him, and I'm expecting him to be as excited by these songs and involved as I am, and yet he hasn't had the same level of ownership that I have. So I actually invited him into that leadership space. This is what we talked about when I say invitation. What I did was I left a part of the song alone for him to actually make the final decisions on, in terms of writing and composition. So I already had my ideas of what should happen there, and it was really hard for me to stand back and not throw all my ideas in the mix, because normally I attack those situations with, you know, ferocity. I want to throw all my information out there. I want to tell everybody all my ideas. I want to be involved, desperately want to be involved. It was hard for me to actually hold back and not be involved. And I said, and his name, I said to him, I said, look, I would actually really love you to decide what should we do here. Should we go to a B section? Should we go to a C section? Should we change key? Should we go up in tempo, down? I can't remember what the actual specifics were, but I invited him into that space to make the decision, and I saw the impact that it had was immediate. He felt instantly better because he felt like he was part of the song, and his body language just changed instantly. He was just there, and he was keen, and he was involved. And so, you know, sometimes, you know, you have to put your own agenda to decide if you're going to be a good leader and invite somebody else in. And sometimes a good leader is somebody that actually sits back and allows somebody else to take the control. And I think with 13 minutes left on the clock, we should probably start answering the rest of the questions. But I think it was just important to spend that time on this subject because it just,
No, I agree. I think it's a very, I think it gives a lot of context to this unit. I think it's important as well. So, no, I don't think, it's definitely interesting.
I'm always really interested to hear stories from students and things like that about, what things work and what things they like and what things they don't like. And if you think about what you like in the team leader and what you may not like in a team leader, it's almost always the leadership skills. The ones that tell you who they are and are really honest and open, and you feel that you could just trust them. There's just trust with them. I know who you are. There's no question in my mind. They ask questions of me. They care about me. They want me to succeed. They know what my real values and goals are in this business, and they're trying to help me. They are the ones. Those are the ones. The good managers are the ones that are good leaders, really, and it's almost always the case. So it's such a fascinating subject because I really feel like this is what differentiates the best from the rest, so to speak, in terms of business. So let's spend the rest of the 10 minutes just answering the questions and telling students what.
Yeah, of course. I think we're just up to question 4.
Yeah, I'll read it out for you if you like.
Sounds good.
Cool. Question 4 is, what is likely to happen if you work with a manager who is disorganised, appears to be unhappy or insecure in their role, and criticises the organisation that they work for?
And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that may have had this experience previously, and think about it from the perspective of, if you're working with somebody and they're your manager and they're they're looking after you and they're responsible for, setting your targets, setting your objectives, coaching, training, as we mentioned up in question 1, what happens if they are disorganised, or what happens if they are unhappy or insecure, and what happens if they can constantly criticise the organisation? I mean, what impact is that going to have? What will that start to do to the culture? What will that start to do to the team? There is, I guess, a lot of, I would feel that everybody out there would be quite confident in trying to kind of answer this question. But, think about the detriment it would have on the team. We've identified the importance of having a manager and what they can do. So if that manager can't do those types of things or fulfill those needs in terms of that role, what's going to happen? I mean, are there going to be targets, goals and objectives? Is there going to be training in an organisation? Is there going to be good, conflict resolution skills? There's probably not. So what's likely to happen in those types of situations?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to move on to the next question.
Yep.
Question 5, what is likely to happen if you work with a manager? Sorry, question 5 is the same as question 4.
Yes.
Check it out. Question 4 and 5 is the same, so you could just leave this question 5 empty. One empty.
Ooh.
If you put a wrong answer in 5 after correctly answering question 4, I'm going to erase your answer in question 4 and make you start again.
Oh.
Oh no, I'm mean. How mean am I? I'm very mean. No, I won't do that. All right. No need to answer question 5. It's a repeat of 4.
Yeah.
Question 6, consider the ways in which your actions and behaviour characteristics and workplace fit in with your description of a good manager. Do you consider that you are or will be a good leader/manager?
Ooh, this is a nice bit of a reflectional, I guess, question for you guys. I guess before we were talking about the importance of actions, we were talking about the role of a manager. We described and have in depth looked at, what makes a good manager, the difference between a leader and a manager. Now, considering all of those types of things, what's your perspective on yourself? So what do you consider? Do you consider that you will be a good leader or a good manager? And if so, why? Why would you consider yourself to be a good leader? Why would you consider yourself to be a good manager, or even both? Give us a little bit, just give us a little bit of an overview as to how you see yourself in that role, whether or not you think, I could do that, or I'm good at that, or maybe there are areas for you to kind of maybe work on. But just again, a bit of an honest response for that. fitting in with what you've mentioned in the previous question with regards to the different roles of a manager?
So for me, really what I'm looking for is, you can say this is self-reflection, as you say, Alyssa. What I'm looking for here is just an understanding of the differences between the two. So, you know, if you talk about that you've got great delegation skills and great, no, I just want to see that you're putting the right things in the right sort of categories. They do cross over a little bit. I mean, a good, you know, communication skill is that of a leader, but it's also of a manager. You know, delegating tasks is important for a manager, but, you know, effectively delegating a task might be an incredibly good leadership trait, especially if you're, you know, doing that on purpose to motivate them or to influence that person, then it is leadership. So they do cross over a little bit, but what we just like to see is a good explanation or self-analysis of some of the skills that you've got there, and you know, do you think that they fit in nicely as a good manager or a good leader, or both, which is fine. Just allow us to see your answers there. Now, question 7, are we done with that one?
Yeah, I think we're definitely done with that one. I think, yeah, it'll be very dependent on what the perception of a manager and leader is. So, yeah. So if you'd like
Question 7 is actually, sorry, Alyssa, question 7 is actually a self-assessment. So where my mouse is here, the little hand, it says click here. If I open that in a new tab, that'll actually open up a document. Apologise for all the clicking. And what we want you to do is rate yourself on all of these areas: excellent, average, needs development. And there's just a whole bunch of different categories there. And this is a really, really light, very, very simple, and that's it, 2 or 3 pages, very, very light way of just doing a quick analysis on self. And then we want you to upload that file into this box here. Now, you can't get that question wrong if you just complete that activity. So as we mentioned, self-reflection is an incredibly important part in influencing other people. I mean, just you know, on the surface, if I'm trying to influence somebody else, but I have no idea about my own behaviours and my own routines and my own abilities, then it just doesn't seem logical that I would know how to cleanly and clearly influence somebody else at a high level, does it? So I guess that's why that we talk about this. Question 8.
Yes.
Why is it necessary to develop and implement performance plans in accordance with organisational goals and objectives?
Right. Okay. So I guess from a management role, we did talk about the important part of their role as kind of looking at development, looking at targets, looking at objectives, looking at coaching, and looking at mentoring. I guess when we're looking at developing and implementing those performance plans, so really looking at your individuals and looking at, I guess, in terms of things like appraisals and goals and strategies, why is it important that you align your team members' goals, appraisals, targets in line with the organisation's goals and targets and objectives? So why is it important that, I guess, all of those targets, all of those plans are in line with where the organisation is headed and where the goals of the organisation are looking at? That's kind of what I would be looking at in terms of that. Why are they necessary why is there a necessity there to align those? You know, if you've got team members, I guess that I guess, and I guess in terms of being a good manager, you know, we talk about from an operational perspective, achieving objectives, and from a leadership perspective, inspiring people. So I guess, why is it important that you've got performance plans that are actually aligned and focused and directed towards what the organisation stands for, represent, and is focused on achieving?
For me, like it does lean a little bit towards leadership, because it's about having that synergy and having a team that's working towards sort of a common goal, that's something a bit greater than the individual. And, you know, human motivation, I mean, understanding human motivation, even to a small degree, humans really like to go to work to do something that's for a bigger and greater cause than just whatever it is that they're doing. So if you can convince me that what my line of work is, whether I'm on the cash registers or on a map the back pricing stock, if you can convince me that my role is leading to a much bigger and greater cause that I'm bought into and I agree with, then that's leadership in itself, because you're effectively motivating me on some of my core values and beliefs. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're also, if you're doing that, you're inspiring people to feel that success by, aligning those targets and helping them reach those goals, and obviously developing and mentoring and getting them to where they need to be as well. So you're right. If people do feel like they've contributed to the greater good, they can see where they fit in the organisation, and I think that they feel really connected to the organisation, which is what you want to have your team do.
And therefore they're more likely to produce, to spend more of their energy and do more work, and be enjoying of their time at work and all those things.
Yeah.
But question 9, what are KPIs? We've been down this track a few times.
Yes, we have.
KPIs stand for Key Performance Indicators. KRAs is another version thereof. Melissa, what does that stand for?
That was the key results areas as well.
Yeah.
So you might have specific areas within an organisation, KRAs, and then you might have specific indicators within that key results areas. So just breaking them down and differentiating them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I would like to see the definition of a KPI. I would also like to see, how they're used in an organisation as well, and the importance of having KPIs.
For me, and KPI almost always has to have a numeric value to it, because if it doesn't have a number, then it's really hard to, it's hard to quantify.
Yep.
So what we don't want to see in KPIs is, all customers are happy.
Yep.
Well, hang on. That's not a bad one to have, actually, but really, what we want to actually do is be able to measure it. So how are we going to ensure that they're happy? Well, we might, 95% of our customer surveys reflect a positive, positive reflections on our business, something like that. That's cool, because now we know 95% of the surveys need to have a positive something.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So a number is really important. I mean, I don't know how to define it, but I feel like a number is almost integral. Otherwise, it's almost, and it can be. I mean, because you can do it without a number, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, it has to be very, very specific when you're looking at key performance indicators. They have to be incredibly measurable. They have to be really tight as well if they're really going to address and quantify that performance. They are really important. They can't be too boundaryless. They have to be quite strict in their construction.
Last question is talking about performance gaps. So what we're looking at, what are the reasons we have a performance gap? So when we're talking about a performance gap, is we have the KPI that we set before, and we're just not meeting that standard. So there's a gap. That's what we talk about when we talk about a performance gap. There is just a space between what we're hoping to achieve and what we're actually achieving. And so this question is basically asking, what are the different reasons, causes, same sort of thing, I guess, that performance gaps may need to be addressed, or what are the reasons that a performance gap will actually occur in the first place? Absolutely,
yeah. Why might people's performance deteriorate? Why, what reasons might come out about from that perspective? So you have identified some strong functions or roles of a manager. So sometimes if we don't have enough information, if we don't have right accessibility to certain things, then it can definitely lead to poor performance. But there's also the personal element there that needs to be considered, that might be experienced by the person that does, that is having a bit of a performance issue at the moment. So yeah, just a couple of ideas and reasons why there might be a performance gap there.
What are some of the reasons a performance gap might exist that is the fault? I don't like using the word, but let's use it.
Yeah.
The fault of the actual individual or the worker. So if you're not performing, what are some of the causes that are really your fault? I hate that word, your fault.
I'm just trying to be politically correct when I kind of address some of these things. Some of these things maybe perhaps you it's a tricky question. If it's my fault, then perhaps I haven't asked the right question. So perhaps I've been to training, but I didn't ask the right questions. Perhaps I might have issues with learning that I perhaps didn't share with anybody. I don't want to say you know, perhaps I might have problems or issues at home that is also affecting my my performance too.
Absolutely, that's genuine.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there are a lot of reasons. There could be cultural reasons why I'm also, there's also a performance gap there. There could be language boundaries.
You could have taken a job, Alyssa, because you needed the bucks, and then after a month or two in the job, you're like, oh, I really shouldn't be here. This is not the place for me, and that might be an effect of that, you know, of that performance gap. I guess why I say that is the funny thing is that we typically always think of performance gaps as the individual's responsibility or fault. And when I asked you that question, you actually found it really hard to just quickly give me an answer as to, you know, some of the reasons, which is really weird because we always think that that's the fault of the individual. Whereas if I ask you now to think of some reasons that are the fault of the organisation, really quick, we could,
Absolutely.
Computer systems are broken, the environment was wrong, there wasn't enough training, the leadership was horrible, you know, I can go on and on and on, we can keep going and going, and we would. But the reality is that a lot of the time poor performance is actually a cause of the actual organisation or the environment that's been provided to the worker, not always the worker's fault. Just remember that when putting your answers together. Consider a mix of things that might be environmental that are outside of the control of the individual, that's all.
Definitely. Definitely.
Alyssa, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up the session today?
No, I think we've covered all of those questions quite well. I think there's enough information there for everybody to kind of move through those questions nicely.
Sounds good to me.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously guys, if you have any more questions, just get in touch with Alyssa or myself. Next Monday we'll be doing part 2, so the next 2 sections, followed by the following week we'll do the assessments. So that's the end of this first section. You should be right now to go off and put your answers through. The learning materials in this section do give you a lot of info on leadership and management theory. So you've got, you know, if you read through that section and then just using your own, listening to this webinar obviously, and then just using sort of your own experience as well, you'll be able to answer these questions pretty easily, I would have thought. Good luck, guys. Thanks very much for your attendance. Thanks for tuning in if you're watching the YouTube clips at a later date, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Have a great night, everybody.
Cheers.